Alright, well, my name is Sharif, and we're going to resolve in our group resolve that plea bargain achieves justice. The article I found on CQ Researcher was written by Albert Alscher, I don't know how to say his name, but the article was written in 1974, and it relates to about the Watergate incident, and it was talking about how the plea bargaining was it was really used in that case. It talks about, I'm using it because of a solvency. I'm gonna use it so I can say it in the debate as one of the solvency issues, right? And so it discusses how the judges were a big part of plea bargaining. That they were discussing in the article how the judges usually would have like a big impact, and that one of the things that the author said that because of that kind of just twisted the case. It just made it a lot worse, and they wanted to solve that. They wanted the judge to be out of the plea bargaining approach. And the second thing the article actually talked about was that the problem with plea bargaining is everything when they're doing a plea bargain, they close the doors and no one can be let in. So everything is just one-on-one with the prosecutor and an attorney. They're just exchanging information. So what the author wanted to do is actually say, well, now let's try to bring it open now. Let's make it transparent instead of closing the door and ignoring everyone else. So that's why a lot of people complained about one of the biggest cases was the Watergate. That's what the article is focusing on. So that's what they really want to focus. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Nelson Rivera, such an enthusiastic audience. Basically, our resolution is, as my colleague said, resolve plea bargain and achieve justice. What I did was I took articles as my examples in my evidence. One of my examples and one of my articles is Plexico Burris, former wide receiver of the New York Giants, former Super Bowl champion. Burris shot himself on the thigh and was convicted of a gun possession charge. He could have faced a sentence up to 3 years in prison. With a plea bargain deal, he was dealt under 2 years in prison. This crime was an act of human mistake and possible self-defense, and no malicious intent was behind it. So that was for my affirmative side. Basically what I was trying to get at was that resolved. The case ended in justice for the prosecutor trying to get him behind bars because he was in possession of a gun, and at the same time the plea bargain reduced Plexico Burris' jail time. So the plea bargain helped achieve justice. My second article for the negative side is an article that I have under a criminal named Joram van der Sloot. He killed a Peruvian woman that he met in a casino in Peru, and at the same time he is the #1 suspect in the disappearance of a Texas girl. She lived in Texas. He wanted to push a plea bargaining for temporary insanity, and he wanted to push a plea bargain saying that he was acting in a self-defense matter for a violent emotion. Obviously, he's trying to avoid time and use the plea bargaining as a scapegoat to avoid less criminal time. And then for my issues, solvency and inherency, what I wanted to ask was, does plea bargaining create unfair opportunities to resolve cases depending on a person's criteria or a person's background or a person's economic status? As we all know, there's a lot of music superstars or athletes, Michael Vick, most famous one, for example, that you could say that there is an argument as if he had more of a right, not a right, but he had a bigger chance of getting a plea deal that would have allowed him to get less jail time than any other normal, ordinary citizen.
Hello, everyone. As my colleague stated before, plea bargaining achieves justice is our resolve too. and I found a couple points very interesting in the midst of us looking for evidence. So I thought the most important thing was to understand what plea bargaining was, because in all actuality I thought I knew, but I really didn't know all the details of it. And according to the Farber and Law by Joseph Farber, which is a book, plea bargaining is I'm sorry, that's misquoted. According to the Black Law Dictionary, plea bargaining is a process in which the defendant arranges a deal with the prosecution. The plea bargaining essentially means that the defendant is charged with multiple crimes, and with plea bargaining, it's a certain charge can be escaped through plea bargaining, and the defendant can go for they can go for charges that are, they can go for a lesser charge. So according to Farber of Law, which is Joseph Farber now, in the United States, the majority of the criminal cases are settled just through plea bargaining. I thought it was also interesting to understand some of the questions that we were trying to figure out in the midst of doing our project, which was, what are the effects of plea bargaining only in the United States, as well as what are the effects of plea bargaining to people who are rich and people who aren't rich. People who are different social classes. So, according to Walter Norman, he is also an author for Here and Now and Plea Bargaining. He says to ask the questions of, could plea bargaining be in an exchange for a testimony in just the United States or in other countries all over the world? And is there something that makes a plea bargaining in the United States different from the plea bargaining anywhere else? And he goes on to state that to begin this exploratory to answer these questions, it is also important to discuss that the criminal justice issue in the United States, to recall the United States federal, it's important to understand the federal system. Though the Constitution and courts have interpreted what is wrong and what is right, Sorry?
Just keep going. You're fine.
Okay. He made a comment in reference to, so messed up. He made a comment in reference to say that it doesn't matter where we are, in the United States or outside of the United States, that plea bargaining needs to be understood as a whole. Who is it affecting? It's affecting the rich as well as the poor. It is affecting those who have and those who have not. Plea bargaining isn't meant for, it isn't meant to find justice. It isn't meant to prevent justice. It's meant to help those who have, and it's meant to hurt those who do not. So those are my positive and negatives, and that's fine.
Thank you. Good.
Alright, in trying to resolve whether plea bargaining achieves justice or not, we have to define each term. We have to decide what we're talking about when we're describing plea bargaining and what we're talking about when we're describing justice. One of the definitions that we used as a group was that justice is being just, impartial, or fair. The problem is that doesn't really say very much. One of the things that we were talking about in group was whether justice is achieved by the person doing a set amount of time. And one of the articles that I found, or in fact a book that I found by Cesar Beccaria, was just saying that longer sentences don't discourage crime. So if longer sentences aren't discouraging crime, then does 25 years make a sentence more just than 15 years or 5 years even? Another issue was how important are sentencing guidelines, since plea bargaining circumvents them. Another issue that we found was trying to figure out whether one of the solvency issues that we had was whether getting rid of plea bargaining actually solves the problem. People who are, one of the things that we were talking about was the idea of multiple charges and people getting off on certain charges but being tried on other ones. And I feel like during the discussion of plea bargaining that the way that it's described is being described as more of a catch-all and not specific to what plea bargaining actually is. In actual trials, when juries are spoken to by the judge, there are certain charges that they say you can only be one or the other. And that's what plea bargaining does, just more quickly. Let's see. And another thing was that we were talking about the creativity in plea bargaining and how effective it was to have that creativity, and it seems that plea bargaining, because plea bargaining is being described as being creative, it adds the issue of making it seem like the prosecutors are the ones deciding the law rather than the legislators, which our group finds problematic.